Since starting this YouTube channel, I often seem to be asked what are my all-time 10 favourite movies. Well, this is one of them. This 4K disc came out on October the 31st, 2022, but at that time I wasn't ready to take a look at it, and the reason being because I've had the film since the early 1990s on Super 8 and I love watching this Super 8 film. However, I have now taken a look at the 4K and it does seem somewhat different to how it looks on this Super 8 film. Highlander on 4K UHD disc has an aspect ratio of 185 to 1. Interestingly, because this is a film, open matte almost, somewhat different to how it appears on Super 8, but even though I've watched this virtually open matte completely at times, never spotted any microphones or anything ridiculous like that, so it seems to work in both formats. The sound on here is listed as DTS HD, but you have to go into the menu to select that. Otherwise it would default to Dolby Stereo, that's 2.0, the Matrix 4-channel Dolby Stereo. It has the usual copyright warning before the menu appears, but then unfortunately there's one of those rather daft messages saying historical attitudes, some may find it offensive. Dear oh dear, how those get on my nerves, and it just seems ridiculous to me. But perhaps the humour, because this is the international cut of Highlander, which was believed to be more for sort of British tastes than it was for American, so some of the most important aspects of what make this film a success were cut out for the North American market. Now, when I was in Los Angeles one time, I think this was the Virgin Megastore on Sunset Boulevard this came from, I thought, Laserdisc of Highlander, that would be the best source for re-recording my Super 8 feature. And so I thought I'd check this first. I went through it. This doesn't look quite right. There's bits missing. So indeed there was a 5 or 8 minute shorter edit of Highlander for the North American market, which removed some of what I considered to be the best humour, which maybe wasn't quite shared by our American cousins, and hence why the shorter version. And this, I think, is why the film was not a success in North America. Now, it had an estimated budget of around $16 million and it only grossed in North America around $6 million, but in the rest of the world this took the worldwide gross up to $13 million. It was actually on VHS that Highlander found its big market, the cult following that it still seems to have to this day. I first saw it on VHS. I just popped into a friend's house and he just started watching a rental of Highlander. So that would have been 1987, I suppose, might have been later, 1986. I sat down with him, we ended up there for the next 2 hours, decided we'd both just seen one of our favourite films. And so I suppose I saw it on television, maybe saw it on video again after that, but it was when Duran Films had Highlander listed in their catalogue. I thought one day I've got to get one of those, and at a British Film Collectors Convention in I think 1992 I came home with a copy of Highlander, this copy. I couldn't have been happier, and even though the sound was not brilliant, I thought one day I'll get that sorted out, and hence the Laserdisc purchase, which didn't entirely work out. I had to turn the recording off, which then meant I had the original Duran sound, which was nowhere near as good as my re-recording. So what do? In the end, that was why I got the VHS and I completely re-recorded it again from that using the sync pulse system, where you put a sync pulse into an Elmo GS1200 using one of Pedro's boxes. Pedro in Italy invented this little box to give us a crystal sync pulse that gives us a locked-in speed of 25 frames a second for PAL video. You do the recording and then you run the film back and you run it back at 24 frames a second, you've got near perfect sound, providing the stripe is good. Now this one is a good one and I do get very good sound from it. The result of all this work with Highlander is that I know the film extremely well, and when the 4K was running through I was able to say the lines as they were coming up. Yes, I know it off by heart, even though I hadn't watched it probably for 7 years on Super 8. I started watching this and I realised I hadn't forgotten a single thing from it. But in here on the video projector, the HDR was too bright. It was similar to Ghostbusters I reviewed recently, and so I had to rein all that in exactly the same way. The film grain structure on it, although Ghostbusters is full frame anamorphic, so not quite as coarse I don't think, but it's very similar again to Highlander. I couldn't find the details of the negative stock used, but it looks similar to Ghostbusters and Aliens. I know you can't see the film grain on the Aliens 4K because it's apparently been removed. I haven't seen that yet, but on Super 8 film they do have a similar look, but I can't be sure without seeing the technical details of both if they are the identical film stocks, perhaps just something similar, a product of their time perhaps. Now the HDR on this 4K of Highlander, in here it immediately made the film grain obvious. It wasn't good to look at, but I tried it afterwards on my television. It didn't have that over bright HDR, so something different between the two systems, something incompatible maybe, but a vast difference between the two screen sizes of course, and that does mean in here you do see everything, you can't miss it, and the film grain structure is coarser than I'm used to with the Super 8, but it's not as sharp on the Super 8, so that lack of clarity, perhaps that slight soft look to the picture might be disguising the film grain, but this is a tiny bootlace gauge. This was taken from the 35mm negative, so it's a bit confusing. Maybe there's been a sharpen tool applied to a Highlander 4K, I don't know, but it does look extremely sharp at times. The colour is very good. In fact, on my telly, I'd say it was excellent. It seemed to look better on that than it did in here, which is unusual. But the density, the contrast, that again is excellent. And overall, it's possibly too good for the time when this film was made. And I say that because the climax of the film, where it's obvious you've got the two characters falling through the skylight on wires, well, you can see the wires. You can see them on the Super 8, they're just not so obvious. So you see the wires there, and then the actual conclusion when the prize has been won and he's in the air spinning around and everything. You've got the cartoon put over the top to help disguise the wires. You can still see the wires and it's far more obvious on here, so that's something to bear in mind. There are a wealth of extras on the 4K disc and also different extras on the Blu-ray. Each has a making of. I watched the 4K making of, which was made just before this 4K disc came out. I thought that was excellent. Then I watched it on the Blu-ray, and presumably that was made for the Blu-ray or a previous DVD. That was excellent too. So that and all the other extras that I'm yet to go through. Even though I had reservations about getting the 4K of Highlander, this makes it good value for me anyway. I've never actually seen any extras on Highlander, having only ever had the NTSC Laserdisc and the VHS. So this made the investment in the 4K Blu-ray combo pack worthwhile. And the Blu-ray is excellent, by the way, just the usual sort of Blu-ray fake looking colours at times, but otherwise I would say this compares very well to the 4K. It's actually a bit of a violent film, after all. There can be only one, don't lose your head, all that rather self-explanatory. It's all about fighting to be the last, and the way these immortals are killed is by decapitation. So even though it's all served up rather well and you don't really think about it as being a violent, bloodthirsty film, that's what the premise is, and hence why it's a certificate 15. One thing that Highlander is very well known for is its transitions from the present day, or 1986 I should say, back to the Scottish Highlands 450 years earlier. And those fades are clever, but it does result in increased film grain on the imagery, and that might make you think, oh, what's gone wrong there? Something's gone wrong with the transfer. It's not. That's just the way the original negative was done, actually optically merging two elements of film onto a third element of film for the final product, and that's why you get the increased film grain. The entire cast in this play so well together. Christopher Lambert as Connor MacLeod, Obviously he's the anchor of the piece, but then Sean Connery, Clancy Brown as the Kurgan, the Terminator of the piece. And now I mention the Terminator, how about the two detectives in this? Bit similar to the two detectives in the Terminator. Some of the ways we follow the Kurgan around, all very Terminator-ish if you ask me. But then Roxanne Hart as Brenda, I think she is the perfect girlfriend for Connor McLeod. And then Heather, played by Beatty Edney, just wonderful. Then there's the score by Michael Kamen and those rock tracks by Queen, and some of the ballads, of course. The cinematography, the beautiful Scottish Highlands, the humour, it all comes together and combines to make a timeless classic, and that's why I've loved it from the day I saw it. I don't imagine everyone's going to feel about it the way I do, but 1986, I would imagine for many people it's dated and a bit cheesy, but I loved it the first day I saw it, and I still love it today. And as I said, I still know the script off by heart. Now there's one other thing I thought I'd mention. I think it was 1992. I was asked by my brother-in-law if there was anything I wanted for Christmas. And I said, how about the Highlander score, the soundtrack? So he went everywhere looking for the Highlander soundtrack, and it is listed on the end credits, Highlander soundtrack available from EMI Records or something. And anyway, it didn't actually exist because the film didn't do well in the box office. It didn't actually get released, and it didn't get a release until 1994. So my poor brother-in-law couldn't find one. He went everywhere, and it was a wild goose chase. But ultimately we got this, which was a combination of the three Highlander films. I think some people do like the second film. It wasn't for me, that one, but I quite enjoyed Highlander 3, but I've only ever seen it once at the cinema. But this is a combination of the main tracks from Highlander and then Highlander 2 and Highlander 3. So you combine that with Queen's A Kind of Magic, and you could actually lift out the relevant tracks from here and the relevant tracks from the Highlander album, and you have actually got the original score. So that's a possibility, and that's something I've yet to do. Maybe I'll record those onto a mini disc one day. But anyway, I think that brings us to the end. One of my favourite films. So for everyone who's been asking me what are my top 10 favourite films, I've possibly got another one I'm going to look at soon. I've mentioned it a few times, Raiders of the Lost Ark. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please give it a like and perhaps consider subscribing so I'll be encouraged to carry on creating similar content to this in the future. Till the next one, bye bye for now.